Hey there, and welcome to another one of our Brexit Explained videos. In this video, we're going to look at the 7 different ways in which no deal could be stopped by MPs, and whether or not they're actually going to happen. We're also going to look at Dominic Cummings' new plan to prevent MPs from stopping no deal, and how that might work. Before we get to that though, let me quickly encourage you to subscribe to our channel. We have 3 big announcements, actually maybe 4 or 5 depending on how you count them. And we're going to tell you all about them when we reach 300,000 subscribers. And looking at our stats, we're getting very close and could even hit it with this video. So if you like our stuff but aren't yet subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when we post our videos. Parliamentary analysis and votes show that the majority of MPs, members of Parliament, don't think that no deal is actually a good thing. In this video, we're not going to tackle whether they're right or not, but instead discuss whether they could prevent no deal from happening. We think there's 7 ways that MPs could potentially try and stop a no deal Brexit, and we're going to run through them in order of likeliness. So here goes. The most likely and most talked about option is a vote of no confidence via the Fixed Term Parliament Act. A vote of no confidence is essentially a vote on whether or not Parliament believes that the government will be able to continue effectively governing. It will probably be tabled by Corbyn and would need a majority of MPs to back the motion, which would likely require the support of at least a couple of Conservative MPs. If a majority was achieved, the Commons would bring down the government and trigger a 2-week period in which the Commons could try and form a new anti-no deal government. If formed, this new government could then ask the EU for an extension, giving the UK extra time to hold a general election. They'd need an extension, because according to current legislation, any general election requires at least a 5-week campaign period. Add the 2 weeks grace period to this, and that comes to a minimum of 7 weeks. So unless Corbyn tabled a motion of no confidence literally immediately after the parliamentary recess comes to an end at the start of September, this 7-week period, during which there'd be no government, would almost definitely overflow past October 31st, meaning that there'd be no government in place when the Halloween Brexit deadline hits. This is especially likely, given that there's a 3-week recess in the middle of September for party conferences. That means that even if Corbyn did table it immediately, it would still be very tight. Therefore, there's a risk that this could lead to a no-deal Brexit without any government being in place to mitigate the impact. Anyway, this temporary anti-no-deal government will be made up of loads of different MPs from all sorts of different parties, which means it will be called a government of national unity. Governments of national unity are only really formed as a last resort, and as such, the last time the UK had one was back in World War II, which should give you a sense of how drastic a measure this would be. Also, any government of national unity might be led by someone like Hilary Benn or Dominic Grieve, instead of Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. That's because choosing Corbyn as a leader could put off some Conservative MPs who would otherwise support a motion against no deal, but wouldn't want to support Corbyn in any way. However, not being chosen as leader would make things difficult for Corbyn. If he was to let another senior Labour MP lead the government of national unity, it might look like he was admitting that that Labour MP might be better suited to lead the party. Equally, given how critical he's been of Conservatives and their policies, he's unlikely to get behind someone like Dominic Grieve or Philip Hammond, even if it's just a temporary measure, in order to request an extension. Because of this, Labour have made it clear that they won't support a government of national unity unless it's led by Corbyn. Anyway, we might be jumping the gun a bit here, because any vote of no confidence has been made quite a lot less likely by Dominic Cummings' most recent intervention, but more on that later. On to the next option. The second most likely option is that MPs seize control of the parliamentary timetable and pass a bill instructing the PM to seek an extension. This is basically what happened in March with the Cooper-Letwin bill. It's worth noting that there'd have to be an actual act of Parliament to legally bind the Prime Minister. Anything else, like a Commons motion calling for an extension, could be ignored. So a legally binding act could be the best way for the Commons to get what they want. However, any bill would obviously have to make its way through the House of Lords, which might take some time. Also, some MPs who might otherwise be against the no deal might be wary of setting a new convention of ordering the Prime Minister around using Acts of Parliament. Constitutionally, it's quite different from a no confidence vote, and that might end up putting some MPs off. The third most likely notion is that MPs will pass a vote of no confidence via the Fixed Term Parliament Act, but also add a crucial amendment to the vote that, if passed, instructs the Prime Minister to seek an Article 50 extension. Any such amendment would obviously have to be selected by the Speaker, but given that Bercow has been sympathetic to the anti-No Deal cause in the past, this is very possible. Constitutionally though, this is also uncharted territory. It's not common practice to amend legislation to include stuff like an order to the Prime Minister, so some more uncertain MPs might not be keen on such a radical constitutional precedent. The fourth most likely option is that MPs will pass a bill amending the Fixed Term Parliament Act to either force Johnson to quit if he loses a no confidence vote, or give them enough time to hold an election before October 31st. Again, this amendment would have to pass through the House of Lords, and again would be stretching constitutional norms, so MPs might be a bit wary of it. It would also be important to make sure that any changes made to the Fixed Term Parliament Act are appropriately worded, because obviously the legislation would still be around after Brexit. The Fixed Term Parliament Act is a constitutionally significant piece of legislation, and amending it should be done carefully and with appropriate regard of how it might be used in the future. It could be a mistake to rush through any changes just because Parliament is so desperate to stop a no deal. The fifth most likely option is that MPs pass a bill proposing a second referendum, or as some call it, a people's vote. The People's Vote campaign hope they can get enough MPs to support the vote by framing it as a choice between a no deal and a second referendum. Realistically though, this is unlikely to happen, because it's unlikely that MPs want to risk whatever precious parliamentary time they have left by forcing a vote which hasn't yet demonstrated majority support in the Commons. The sixth most likely option is that the courts intervene. This has been raised as a possibility by people like Gina Miller and Sir John Major, the former Conservative Prime Minister. There are a couple of rationales for this. It could be argued that Boris is essentially binding his parliamentary successor by driving for a no deal, or that he was overreaching his constitutional prerogatives in some way. However, there are problems with this. Firstly, it would take too long. Any judicial review would definitely go all the way to the Supreme Court, and there's no way it will get done before October 31st. Secondly, this isn't really a legal issue, and the courts would be unlikely to intervene in what's essentially a political debate about the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Finally, the seventh and least likely option is that MPs pass a bill to revoke Article 50. For most MPs, this is the nuclear option, because of how unpopular it would make them with Brexiteers. It's also unlikely because it doesn't currently have anywhere near a majority support from MPs, and no MP will be willing to table such a controversial bill without any guarantee of it actually passing. Anyway, those are the 7 options, from a no confidence vote to MPs revoking Article 50. So what's all this we mentioned at the start about Dominic Cummings? Well, at the start of the video, we talked about a vote of no confidence and the 2-week grace period. Until recently, it was assumed that Johnson would resign as Prime Minister if he lost the no confidence vote, and give Parliament the 2-week grace period to form a new government. However, according to Cummings at least, technically, Johnson doesn't have to resign during the 2 weeks grace period. He could instead stick it out as Prime Minister, claiming that he was trying to form a new government, even though the majority of MPs would have voted to make it clear that they didn't support his government or any other government that backs no deal. If he wasn't able to form a government in that 2 weeks, he would have to resign in order to call the general election. But according to Cummings, he is allowed to stick it out for those 2 weeks, although it would be very politically controversial. Cummings, Johnson's newly appointed and very controversial special advisor, has said that Johnson won't resign in the event of a no confidence vote, in order to stop Parliament from blocking a no deal. Because with Johnson still in place, they wouldn't be able to form a temporary government of national unity in order to request the extension they need. The 2-week grace period with Boris pretending to form a new government would run out, and the country would head straight into general election mode, during which there would be no government. According to current legislation, any general election requires a minimum of 5 weeks campaign period, so there's almost no way this could be done before October 31st, which means that the UK would leave the EU without a deal and with no government in place to mitigate the impacts. This is obviously controversial, as it would involve Johnson blatantly frustrating the will of Parliament. He would know that he couldn't form a government because there's no parliamentary majority for his no-deal policy, but he basically has to pretend he thinks it's possible. At a minimum, it's pretty disingenuous. At most, it's possibly illegal. In fact, the other Dominic in politics, Dominic Grieve, has said that both Johnson and Cummings misunderstood the Fixed Term Parliament Act, and that Johnson would actually be legally required to step down, which has led to some pretty questionable newspaper puns about Dom versus Dom. Anyway, this has made anti-No Deal MPs more desperate, and as such, there's a new plan in place. Basically, to give Parliament more time to sort everything out, some MPs have floated the idea of amending the motion which breaks up Parliament for the party conference recess, which happens in mid-September. This could give MPs another 3 weeks to execute one of the plans we listed above, but this happening is far from guaranteed. Anyway, so those are the options that we foresee, and we'd be interested if you can spot any more. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, be sure to hit the bell icon so you get notified every time we release a video. You can also find TLDR news across other social networks simply by searching for TLDR news. And if you want your name featured at the end of the video just like these people, then be sure to support us on Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description.